Hello and welcome to the triple digits episode of Week in Review, episode number 100. That is absolutely incredible. On this week's show, we're going to finish up looking at Life is Strange 2. We'll cover the final 3 episodes and I'll give you some final thoughts on it. We'll also take a look at this week's new releases and I'll tell you about streams happening over on twitch.tv/Shaunosaurus This week, we're going to continue working with Life is Strange 2. We'll cover episodes 3, 4, and 5, and I'll give you a quick little recap before we jump in. I really liked the awesome adventures of Captain Spirit. I almost said Captain Strange, but I was like, that's not right. It's something different, and thankfully I remembered it, but then I told you I was going to goof it up anyway. I liked that episode a lot. I thought it was really good in establishing kind of the tone and the mood they were going for. I was a little worried about the story aspect of are they going to do the like parent that doesn't want to be a parent but then learns how to be a parent, or learns that they want to be a parent and it's all precious and it's kind of a bullshit story? But they threw me a curveball and they didn't actually do that. Instead, episode 1 throws you a curveball and you actually play as Sean and Daniel Diaz, who, after a very traumatic and horrendous series of events involving your father being shot by a cop, Sean kills a kid and then the cop dies due to an electromagnetic kind of explosion, kind of like, think like superhero stuff. They are on the run, trying to deal with that sort of stuff. The game gets away from having like a super focused narrative and instead it just kind of follows them meandering around. While I thought episode 1 started strong, it kind of feels aimless in the last 3/4 of it. It has some interesting stuff. There are some good bits to it. But it just didn't feel super cohesive, and I've not been convinced of the main plot arc of getting to Puerto Lobos, which is a thing that is mentioned a few times, but it never seems like Sean is convinced that that is his actual plan. Episode 2 is worse than episode 1. It does a weird little time jump. It forces you into some poor plot decisions that I wasn't super on board with, and no matter how hard I either tried to get out of it or just didn't want to do it in the first place, the game kind of forces you into a couple of situations that they kind of have to make other elements of the story work. But honestly, this episode could have been cut out and I don't think you would really be missing much. What I don't think I really hit on when I reviewed it last week is that after episode 2, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to continue with this game. I wasn't really feeling the story. Episode 2 was enough of a frustration with a culminating event that I didn't think worked very well, that I kind of just wanted to walk away. However, this is a very story-focused game. Maybe after 2 episodes, it finds its footing a little bit. It gives me something to care about, something to cheer for, a reason to kind of keep going. But episode 3 doesn't do that at all. Episode 3 really solidified why I don't like this game up until this point. It's a really frustrating episode to play through. So we get another time jump. I think this one's like 6 or 7 weeks, something like that. And now we are in California in the forest working on a weed farm. You and your 10-year-old brother, I believe this is where he has a birthday. He has a birthday at some point in the series. I can't remember exactly where it is, but let's just say he's 10 at this point. It doesn't actually matter. You and your 10-year-old brother are working on a like secret weed farm in the middle of this like national forest, and you're hanging out with all your hippie friends. The time jump in this episode is a major issue for me because this specific episode relies on the conversations that you have to make you care about the characters that you're interacting with. So at the end of the episode, when you have to leave, you're supposed to be bummed about it, but I never felt like I got enough information about them to really care all that much. We meet up with Finn and Cassidy, who we met in the second episode, and that's kind of our connective tissue. It's about the only thing from episode 2 that really seems to matter at this point, but that isn't ever really explained, and I'm kind of just assuming that that's what happened. Like, Finn and Cassidy introduced the idea that they are train hopping across the country to Sean and Daniel in episode number 2. That's about all that they really do. It's kind of your escape out of the situation in episode 2. What is a kind of clever workaround is that the Oregon area that you were working with has a snow element, a winter element. Moving south to California eliminates that problem, so you don't really have to worry about like oh, we have to make sure we have a fire to stay warm. Do we have the correct clothes? You can kind of write them out of that situation and put them in a different set of circumstances. Unfortunately, the circumstances aren't all that interesting, and Daniel becomes a real royal egotistical pain in my ass. My frustration with Daniel in this episode, or continued frustration with Daniel in this episode, starts very early. He's working on throwing knives with Finn, and he hits 6 targets in a row. Well, that's pretty good. Let's keep in mind that he's absolutely using his powers to get these great numbers, because Finn's kind of too much of a stoner to know. And so you come over and you throw it, and then I hit the target once. So after you hit the target, you have a second shot at it, because it's like first time is luck, second time is a pattern. Cool. So you go to throw it a second time, and he uses his power to make you throw it way off to the side. Instead of forward, it's way over. Man, is it irritating. It is so annoying, because he's like, what? I didn't. And he knows that I can't say anything about it because we're supposed to be keeping the powers a secret. But he also knows that, like, there's no way that Finn's going to put together all this different stuff. And it's really annoying. He also really goes back and forth, Daniel does, between wanting to be treated as an adult and complaining, you treat me like a kid, I'm not a kid. And then there's a scene later in the episode where he's like, hey, will you walk to bed with me? And I'm like, no. You need to pick one or the other. Either I'm treating you like an adult and you as an adult go to bed by yourself, or you recognize that I'm the adult and you want me to take you to bed, but you also listen to me every once in a while, because dear God in heaven, does he not listen in this fucking episode? And it is awful. It's egregious. There is one scene where you tell him, like, you're supposed to get paid by the drug lord bosses, whatever. You tell him, hey, just sit outside. We're going to run in. We're going to get paid. We'll be right out. No big deal. He bitches and whines and moans, like, I'm not an adult, I can do this, blah, 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 blah. We're inside the building for maybe 2 minutes, and in that time, Daniel has the idea to be like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to break into this place and just fuck everything up. Fuck everything up, and now all of a sudden, instead of having, like, a job and a steady income to save to get money to go to Puerto Lobos, now we have to leave. What the fuck? How are you this non-listening? The problem is that it has to force its hand. The game has to force its hand because of this sequence. You end up having to tell a very small group of people about Daniel's powers. One of them will turn into kind of an interesting turn that I didn't really see coming, but Finn, for the love of God, fuck Finn, 1. But 2, he comes up with this really dumb idea to use Daniel's powers to steal money from the people that have hired them on to pluck all the weed. There's also, by the way, an egregiously boring minigame where you actually are, like, cutting weed, and it is atrociously boring, because not only is the conversation not interesting, but also the gameplay mechanics are terrible, and it lasts way too long, and it's this culmination of, God, this sucks, all from every different angle. Anyway, going back to Finn's plan. Again, the game forces you to go in a specific direction no matter how many times you say no. And I said no repeatedly. I said no the first time it was mentioned. I said no the second time it was mentioned. And I said, fuck no. There's a girl hanging out down by the lake that I'd really like to go see. She probably doesn't have any clothes on. For the love of God, Finn, stop talking to me about this fucking heist that you want to do, because I don't want to do it, and I've already told you 17,000 times. The game makes you do it anyway. And this is the weird thing about this game, because it has to be paced, certainly. It took me a little while to actually get there, and the idea is that basically what happens is, if you say no, Daniel decides that he wants to do it anyway. But you and Cassidy, which is how I played, end up having sex in her tent, and you're, like, way far behind. But the time difference isn't accounted for. There's, like, a puzzle section in the middle where you have to steal a car to get to the thing, to get to the, like, main area where the robbery is supposed to be taking place. But when you pull up, Finn and Daniel are just, like, standing at the door, like, just waiting. They're like, are they here yet? Do we move the plot along? I don't see them. We'll just stand in front of this door. Oh, there they are. Okay, we can continue. And it's just odd because there's again that like supposed situation of intensity or some sort of time limit that just isn't a factor at all because the game needs to hit certain beats in its story. When it's all said and done, the robbery goes sideways. Daniel gets shot in the arm and then lets his power off and all hell breaks loose. You get knocked out and you have a piece of glass in your eye. It's an interesting way to end the episode. It was very much like, what the heck is going to happen? I thought I knew exactly what was gonna go on. I figured that the letter from episode 2 would show up and he would find the P.O. box and try and track down his mom. But we'll see what happens as far as episode 4 is concerned here in just a minute. But episode 3 is just such a frustration. The conversational aspect doesn't work. The characters I don't really care enough about. I liked Cassidy enough, and Finn drove me absolutely insane. There is one thing that I did skip over in this review, and it's that you can pick the sexuality of Sean in one of the conversations here. I thought that was a neat little touch. It's a very small little thing, but it's there, and I think that's really cool. That's probably the nicest part of the episode, the best part of the whole thing. The game continues to push Daniel down the road in a very frustrating manner that I just really don't enjoy and I'm not engaged with. I think he's more of a frustration in like just a general sense of like him kind of just being an egotistical, non-listening, somewhat whiny ass instead of like, oh, this is my brother, and he's just being like a pain in the butt little brother. Like, it's just, I don't know, I'm not enjoying it. The episode just continued to work with my frustrations and continue down those paths, making Daniel super frustrating to deal with. Dealing with Finn is not fun. He's an idiot and I just never really liked him, and forcing you into a couple of decisions that just, no matter how many times you say no, the game is like, no, we're going to do this anyway. It's really frustrating, and it's just, this game is really not clicking with me to the point where I'm not wanting to continue to play it. But I did continue to play it, and fortunately episode 4 offered what I thought was the best episode of the season since Captain Spirit. It is amazing to look at this episode and look at how helpful it is to have a clear-cut, concise, this is what I have to do goal. So at the end of episode 3, Daniel goes missing. I mentioned that one of the characters has a weird reaction in episode 3. What I read from it was that he got really scared about Daniel's powers, but that's not actually what happened. It turns out that this character thought that he had found his faith in God again and took Daniel to a cult. That's right, we have to rescue Daniel from a cult. That sounds ridiculous on the surface, and it actually kind of is. The cult aspect of it is a little one note, and it doesn't have the most playtime in the episode, but I just go back to the idea of having a clear-cut goal to it and how helpful that is to just be like, that's what I need to get done. The episode starts a little bit slow. You wake up in a hospital after being knocked out from the blast at the end of episode number 3. And yet again, the game gives you an opportunity to kind of just come out with the information. You're talking to like an FBI agent or whatever it is, and you can be honest with them and you can let them know, hey, like, here's what happened, here's what's going on. Because what I thought was going to happen at the end of episode 3 was that Daniel was going to go to the P.O. box and try and find his mom, I thought this would be a good opportunity for the game to let you kind of just give up and just say, you know what, I'm done. I've taken this as far as I can go. I am stuck in this hospital. There is no reason for me to try and escape and continue on. But because Daniel is not in the best situation, the game, again, forces you to make Sean make worse decisions. So instead of just saying like, okay, fine, we're good, take me in, Daniel's with his mom, cool, we'll call it there. Instead, he breaks out. In my playthrough, I knocked out a security guard, and then he commits Grand Theft Auto. So, it's so frustrating, because it was such a good opportunity to just advance the time. Advance it, like, let's say he gets 7 years, whatever the number is. Advance that, show the relationship between Daniel and Karen, the mother, have you rebuild that relationship with Daniel over the last couple episodes, and figure it out from there. That's not what happens because Daniel is part of a cult now. This episode has the best and most effective scene that we've had in a very long time in a conversation with your dad. It turns out that it's actually a dream, and I loved the way that it cut because they show Sean driving for a very long time. He pulls off the side of the road, gonna get some sleep. The way that it like closes his eyes, cuts the screen to black, and when they cut, he's holding the steering wheel. I thought was like, oh wow, like we jumped to the next morning, and then I looked at his hair and was like, wow, his hair grew a lot, whatever, and I didn't think about it. And then he's having this conversation with his dad, and so what I thought it was you're jumping back, you're just having this memory, whatever. But what I liked so much about this sequence was not only the way it was cut, but the conversation itself. It's that super great, interesting dynamic between Sean and his dad that I wish we had more of in this series. It's so good. I really liked Sean's dad in this. I liked the interaction between the two of them. They're bantery, they're playful, they're looking forward to this 5-day father-son getaway. Daniel's back at home with one of Sean's friends and they're babysitting, and he calls in and is like, we're gonna watch a movie and all this like really good charming stuff, and it's what this game needs so much more of. Unfortunately, all of this is just a dream, and you have unintentionally, when you pulled off to the side of the road to get some rest, you have unintentionally driven onto someone's land, and unfortunately the person is a huge piece of shit, racist douchebag, and that leads into a heated confrontation. Yet again, the game dips its toes into Sean and Daniel, in this case just Sean, dealing with just people who are rude and racist towards them. It's another time where it kind of dips into something interesting, but it doesn't really say anything much about it. It kind of just happens. Sean moves on, he runs out of gas, he then has to walk for a while and gets picked up by a truck driver. I thought this was an interesting decision because I thought that this would have been a good time for Brody to show up back from the first episode. You can kind of fill him in, tell him what's been going on, and then he can go on about his day. He can maybe fill you in on his life and what he's been dealing with. And I know that you can go, there are a couple different times you can go to Brody's blog that he writes. Like, I was trying to think of the name of it, but I can't think of the name of what it is. And you can kind of catch up there, but I thought this would have been a cool way to get like casual players kind of caught up on a character that I thought was really interesting. And the interaction between the truck driver is fairly short anyway, so why not have it be a callback to a previous episode and catch you up there. Once you get to the church, you get introduced to the cult leaders. They try to play it off as a church, but there's something is like very clearly wrong about it. Again, they're really one note, and of course, this is the one time that Daniel's full attentive, completely listening to someone. Now, of all times, remember when I told you to sit outside the weed place when we were getting paid? And then you were like, I'm gonna just break in, like it's cool. This is when you're listening now? After a confrontation, you get thrown out of the church, and this is where your mom, Karen, shows up. And this is where the bulk of the episode, this episode kind of breaks down into 4 separate chunks, kind of like the first episode, where it's hospital, driving sequence / hitchhiking to the church, and then so the introduction of that aspect of it. A large section where you talk with Karen, your mom, and this is where you probably have the most agency in how the story progresses. I chose to be very cold to her. She gives some bullshit excuse about how she was trying to fit into societal norms by having kids, but she didn't really want kids, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this is all falling on deaf ears. I don't give a shit. Just go talk to a brick wall. You'll have more of an effective speech pattern if you just go talk to that. Because I don't really give a shit what your excuse is. You've been gone for 8 years. Fuck off. It took one letter from some guy that you don't know to bring you to take care of Daniel. It's been 8 years. Fuck off. Anyway, you have the opportunity to reconnect should you so choose, but the episode progresses regardless of your decisions. In this case, it's fine because, again, the goal is we got to get Daniel out of this, so it makes sense that the game pushes you in a specific direction and you don't really have much of an option to it. The wrinkle in this is that one of the people from the from the previous group you were with in episode 3 has a very sick sister who is in the compound with Daniel, and you need to rescue both of them so that you can get her the medical help that she needs. It's kind of subtly hinted at, but I think it's interesting that they show that this family that's supposed to be all about God cares a whole lot more about this kid that just wandered into their lives that can make them a bunch of money than their own, like, very sick child. It's an interesting, again, it's a thing that pokes at, like, here's this interesting little idea, and then works instead with you talking to Karen a lot, because I really give a shit what she has to say. And if you're thinking to yourself, wow, Sean, once you show up with Karen at this church, Daniel surely will listen. He doesn't. It's a whole big long conversation with the church on fire that I actually enjoyed. You have to, like, mash the A button to make Sean get up, to keep fighting, to keep showing, you know, how willing you are to try and get him back onto your side. It doesn't work 100% because there's a section earlier in the game, or in this episode, where the lady complains that you're spilling blood in a house of God. And then you never bother to bring that up. Like, you get punched in the face repeatedly, and you're like, the answer is very easy to just be like, hey, Daniel, look at the hypocrisy here. Look at how they don't actually believe what they're saying. They're using you to get money when they were complaining earlier about me spilling blood in the house of God. Look what they are doing and how they don't seem to care because it's their best interests trump everything else. And there was that very easy argument, but and maybe you can go that way. I tended to go with a little bit more of like a we're family route. This is where some of the dialogue really struggles and some of the voice acting really struggles as well, as I just didn't really believe it. And then you also get left with a very big decision that possibly has ramifications in the 5th and final episode. But it's a pretty well contained episode by itself. You have to get Daniel from a cult. You talk with your mom for a little bit. You break out of a hospital. It's weird because, like, I am focused much more on the second half of this one than the first half. When I was writing my review notes, I was writing them down and I was like, okay, you got to rescue from a cult. The cult leaders are a little like one note and whatever. I get the point. They could have gone further with it. You talk to Karen a bunch. I didn't really like her all that much. Oh, right. There was a whole first half of this episode that completely, like, just evaporated from my mind because I was so focused on the main goal of it. I like the idea that they set up that one of the kids from your group in the previous episode, whose name I'm totally forgetting because I didn't write it down, he mentions about being from a religious family, but I didn't necessarily connect those dots as to, like, when he sees Daniel's powers in episode 3, he goes, oh, Eureka, I've refound my faith in God, and I'm going to take this child down to this thing, and I'm going to show him, and it's going to be this whole big deal. And, you know, for the most part, like, I actually believed him. I thought he was trying to do the right thing. He couldn't find you. The explosion happens. Daniel runs off. He couldn't find anybody else. He's like, I just figured I'd take him down here. This felt like a safe place to take him. It wasn't. It was a very bad place to take him, but, you know. So I like the idea of someone thinking that they're doing the right thing and it just kind of gets out of their control and everything just goes sideways and there's not much. Like, it was something that was paved with good intentions. It just didn't work out the way they wanted them to. It's the most interesting episode that we've had in a while. It has the best and most effective scene that we've had probably the entire series. But some of the episode gets a little lost in the shuffle, and it helps tremendously that there is a clear, defined goal. And I think that for me is what elevated this above a couple of the previous episodes. And it also made sense to push you in a specific direction instead of being like, no, I don't want to do this, in the game going like, you're gonna do it, so just do it. This one felt more natural to be like, I don't really want to deal with Karen and I don't really want to talk to her, but I have to get my brother out of this situation. It helped push me through to the end. Finally, we have episode number 5. It all comes down to this. This is a really interesting episode in that you spend a lot of time with Karen. So after episode 4 ends, you part ways with the other group that you were, or the other two that you were working with. They go on about their business. You can find a letter from them. Everything's good. But you go with Karen to her little secret hideout. I really liked this section of it. It's a pretty big open area. It's filled with interesting characters. You can have fun conversations with them. You can do a little scavenger hunt, or treasure hunt rather, with Daniel that leads you to a couple of little areas and leads you to a collectible, and it's a fun idea that I thought was actually really well implemented, because sometimes in adventure games it counts on you to know exactly what they're looking for, but because Daniel and Sean have walkie-talkies, Daniel will come over the radio and be like, "Oh, you're getting hotter. You're getting hotter. Oh, you're getting cold." And that really helps narrow the area down to find what you're looking for, which is just a little thing that he found that he thought you would like to search for. And it's a fun little thing to do. The episode pacing harkens back a little bit to the first episode of long section to kind of lull you into a false sense of security, and then the game all of a sudden kind of ratchets up the intensity. Basically, the before you get into the camp, you spend the night on like part of the, what I'm assuming is the Grand Canyon, but I'm not 100% sure. It doesn't really matter. You spend the night in one spot. You have to come in, return a telescope to someone, and then wait for Karen to get back with supplies. Because of the way that episode 4 ends, where kind of all hell breaks loose in this church, and like there's like a big fire, the police start to become an issue because they're on your trail. And when Karen's at the market, she realizes that people have figured out like kind of what's going on. So now you need to move. You need to exact the final piece of your plan. You need to get to the border, and you need to cross the border to get to Puerto Lobos. This is where it finally feels like, oh, this has been the plan the entire time. It doesn't feel like it's a kind of side quest, best case scenario objective. This is what we are doing. But before you leave, you need to get a police monitor so that you can obviously monitor the police so you can get to where you need to get to safely. Karen has decided that she's going to create a distraction that will allow you a little bit of extra time. I didn't really buy this. I never believed that she cared all that much in the first place. Part of that was my own doing because of the way I responded to her questions and stuff like that. But I just didn't believe the turn. I never believed that she cared. This is when the game decides that it needs to throw in a weird cameo from Life is Strange 1 that isn't effective and is kind of confusing given the canon ending of the first one, which I believe is that you save Chloe and let the tornado take out the town. Spoiler alert for Life is Strange 1. I don't know how anyone bothered to do that. Chloe was never worth saving, and you're going to let a tornado take out a bunch of innocent people because you care about Chloe, even though they never really made her a compelling character. I don't really buy it. Anyway, there's a weird cameo. It doesn't make sense. I never believed them. I hated them in the first game. I still hate them now. And anytime they were like, I have some parenting advice I'd like to share with you, I'm like, shut the fuck up. I played the first game and I know that you're a piece of shit. I don't care. Anyway, you get the police scanner, you go to where you need to go, you use Daniel's powers to blow a hole in the border wall, and you're gonna get across the border. You are right there. You're right there. You can see it. All you gotta do is get across it. And this is when the game has you do two things. One, it has you park way far back away from it, which I guess makes sense saying it out loud because of the way the explosion that Daniel's powers create works. Okay, I guess that makes a little bit more sense. But two, it makes you have a really extended conversation that is way too long and gives other characters enough time to show up, and all hell breaks loose and shit goes south and you don't get to do your ultimate goal. So you're right there at the goal, and then all of a sudden the game's like, no, we're going to extend this out just long enough so that something catastrophic happens. Because of this conversation, Daniel ends up getting shot. You encounter two very racist people who like just patrol the borders and just shoot at will because they're assholes. And then you end up in a detention center with a family, a man and a woman who is pregnant, and you have a very enlightening conversation about what they're trying to do, what their goals are, and I liked that interaction. I liked the way that worked. After the conversation gets a little bit testy with the racists who are in the other cell, because the cop that arrests you and takes you into the detention center isn't the cop that they're used to dealing with. There's like a conversation that happens where they're like, hey, we have an understanding. We do this all the time. And the cop's like, well, I'm putting a fucking end to this because this is ridiculous and stupid. Like, look at what's happened. You shot a child. Like, what the fuck are you doing? You're idiots. They're in another thing. The conversation gets a little heated, a little testy between the people in the room. You have the option to like have the guy stop you, like, hey, knock it off. I let him go for it. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. These people are pieces of shit. Just go for it. just go for it. Side note, it's going to get a lot worse for those two people in the other cell, because let's just say Daniel's powers come into play a little bit. You can put the pieces together. After that conversation is done, you get pulled into a room where you're going to talk to the police officer. And this was, again, a point where I was like, I've taken this as far as I can go. I have made things infinitely worse since I left that hospital. I'm good. I just want to turn in. I want to just be done with this. I'm very at that point. Guess who decides to show up and fuck everything up yet again? Oh, if you guessed Daniel, you're absolutely correct. He shows up, lets his powers go crazy, knocks out the cop, go over. We take care of the racist pieces of shit, work our way out of the station, and for some unbelievable reason, instead of going to the place that we blew a hole in the wall with Daniel's power, we just go right for the normal, like, border crossing station that is completely surrounded by police officers. And I can't understand this decision. And I sat there when I was playing, I was just like, why did they not go? They already did the work on the other thing. Daniel's power was able to blow a hole in the thing. They're right there. Just drive on right on through. Yet again, you have a decision to either surrender or to force your way into Mexico and continue with this plan. I, again, was like, okay, this is as far as I want to go. I just, fuck it. Like, I'm done. I just want to get this over with so that I can move on. Like, we have enough information that Sean never bothers to really string together in a cohesive way. Like, the person that we killed was an accident. He just happened to land on a rock. He was getting in a confrontation with my brother. I stepped in. Things got out of hand. I pushed him. He landed. The cop that ended up dead, he killed my dad. I was trying to protect my brother. I ran. I made a dumb decision. I shouldn't have done that. Let's figure something out and let's just go back home, go back to Seattle. That's what Daniel's been talking about a couple of times throughout the series to this point. I want to go back. I want to go see my friends and do that whole sort of thing. Hey, if you can guess what happens next, I will give you a high five next time I see you. If you guessed Daniel doesn't listen when you pick surrender, you're correct, because he goes, fuck this. And apparently at some point his powers can now reflect bullets, but there's a really weird situation that happens where there are a ton of cop cars in front of your car. Very clearly, 2 cop cars pull up behind you. I never saw any bullets come from behind me. And I was sitting there going like, there has to be, this doesn't make any sense. This doesn't work. Oh God, it's so frustrating. I hit the button, made the decision. I was like, okay, cool. We're going to walk away. We're going to be fine. We're going to walk away. Okay. Break the wrist, walk away. And Daniel's like, fuck that. And then goes on through. And then we got the ending where, spoiler alert, Sean got shot in the throat because Daniel didn't fucking listen again. So we got the ending where it's just Daniel. It advances a number of years, whatever it is. He does some stuff. I don't really know. It's not a super great ending. The ending plays out. It's very anticlimactic. The one thing I will say that is a positive of this game is I went back and I made the other decision with this specific playthrough where I just say, you know what? We're just going to stick with the plan. And Sean actually lives, and it's kind of cool. It's significantly different. It's not different from like a location standpoint, but it is different enough that like Sean lives. He starts working on a car shop. 3 people come in to rob the place. Daniel uses his powers to steer them away. Everybody lives relatively happily ever after. Cool. It's interesting that there are such significant changes to it. From the stats screen, you get like a choices thing. It'll tell you about the decisions you made and what percentage of people that played the game made the same decision as you. It looks like there are 4 different endings. I haven't looked the other endings up just yet. I have thought about it though, because I'm curious to see how it goes if you make a couple of other decisions. According to the little decision guide, it's like Sean surrenders and Daniel accepts. Sean surrenders and Daniel doesn't. Sean doesn't surrender and Daniel accepts, and then Sean doesn't surrender and Daniel doesn't accept, or something like that. Whatever it was, there are four. It looks like there are four definitive specific endings to it. It's an interesting episode from a pacing perspective. I like, again, it harkens back to the first episode with, hey, we're going to kind of lull you into this false sense of security, and we're going to all of a sudden turn things on a dime. This one doesn't turn on a dime necessarily. It kind of slowly builds the tension from like, hey, the cops are here, to we got to get this thing and we got to get going. I like the idea. I like the open area, or the opening area you kind of work around in. The characters are interesting. I liked them a lot more than the characters back in episode number 3. It just doesn't work. It makes a couple of decisions towards the end of the game where I feel like it should have gone differently. Like, I should have ripped the wall open and gone on through. I was totally fine. There was no hint that anyone was anywhere near there. The conversation took too long because they parked their car so far away. It's frustrating. And then yet again, Daniel continues to just use his powers flippantly and willingly whenever he wants to, and that's really annoying. I do understand that the final decision that I made, where I said, hey, I'm going to surrender, and Daniel goes, nah, fuck that, we're going through, that is a culmination of the decisions you make throughout the game. So if I had maybe steered Daniel in a different direction in a couple of earlier episodes, specifically, maybe don't shoot the lady at the end of episode 4, things may have turned out a little bit differently. But as it stands, kind of a meh ending on my original playthrough. It's fine. I think this game just really wore me down. As you could probably guess, overall, I didn't really like this game. I found the characters and situations to be frustrating. There is way too much of a reliance on conversations that either extend the situation way too long so that something bad can happen, in episode 5, or it completely removes the tension from the situation that's happening, like back in episode number 2, at the end of that, when the thing has fallen on your grandpa, and it's like, oh my god, there is a sheriff at the door, we need to go. Stop having this conversation, dear God in heaven. They would have broken the door down by now. It's really frustrating. There are far too many times where the game forces you into a decision you don't necessarily want to make. Both episodes 2 and 3 do this. Daniel is a complete and utter frustration and doesn't listen throughout a majority of the game. And there are too many times where the game creates a situation where there doesn't really need to be one, like back in episode 3 when Daniel can't just sit still. There are a couple of interesting points here and there. There's some interesting stuff scattered throughout, but it doesn't really do anything with those interesting ideas. It doesn't take them very far. Too many times you have the opportunity as Sean to try and string your words together, try to put the thought process out there for someone to hear, and he just never bothers to do that. This game feels like such a big miss. As far as the Life is Strange games go, I liked the first one that they released up until about the halfway point of episode 5, and I think that game has a really terrible ending decision. I don't understand who would pick Chloe in that. I picked the town. And it was the easiest decision I've ever made. Like, I am 100% willing to sacrifice Chloe for the lives of countless people who are innocent and have nothing to do with this. I thought Before the Storm was a step up. That was done by a different studio, though. I liked the way they humanized and fleshed out Chloe in a way that made her a lot more bearable in the first Life is Strange game. This is head and shoulders a step down from the previous games in the series. It's not all that interesting. I think it struggles to really find its footing. It never really clicked with me in a way that the other games did. It's fortunately, like, if you're interested in the game, it has a low barrier to entry. If you have an Xbox, the first 4 episodes are on Xbox Game Pass. You can find The Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit for free everywhere. The problem is that even though that was a fantastic setup episode, the rest of the game doesn't really follow that. We never get any sort of follow-up with Brody from like a conversational standpoint. We never see what's his face? We never even see Captain Spirit again. We get a couple letters from him here and there. It sets up interesting stuff. It doesn't follow through on it. I don't know. This game really wore me down, and I became very frustrated with it in a way that I was kind of just I was very thankful when it was over, and not because like, wow, it was a great ride, but just like I'm good. I don't want to have anything more to do with this. Finally, on this week's show, we'll take a look at this week's new releases. There's nothing on Blu-ray. There's some counter programming to Star Wars Episode 9 in Bombshell and Cats, which looks absolutely horrifying. I saw the trailer for the first time last week. Yeah, it sounds right. Last week. And my goodness, I do not like the way that movie looks at all. I don't really know why I'm listing it here, but here we are. Cats is out this week, if you so desire, I guess. And then there are two games that are a little on the strange side. Untitled Goose Game, which I've already played. It's fantastic. I love it very much. It hits Xbox One and Xbox Game Pass along with PlayStation 4 this week. So if you have Game Pass, you can download it for free and experience the wonderfulness that is Untitled Goose Game. That game is fantastic. Also out this week is Wadham. I don't know what this game is because the trailer is weird as hell and I just don't know what the game is. But it looks really unique and interesting, and I'm interested to give it a try sometime in the near future. Speaking of Untitled Goose Game, it's time for round 2 of that game. I'll be playing that on the Xbox One on Wednesday and Friday, doing some achievement cleanup on Friday, and then just doing like the story mode, main story mode on Wednesday. And then Saturday, I'm going to finish up Black Sad, and then Sunday is a question mark. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to be playing, but there will be a stream on Sunday, so if you want to come by twitch.tv/ShaunosaurusRex, feel free to come enjoy the streams. Come by for Goose Game. It's going to be real good. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode of Week in Review. We've made it to 100 episodes. Thank you so much for watching. If you've watched any of the episodes before this, if you're just joining, you're brand new here, hopefully you'll stick around. Hopefully you enjoyed the content. If you did enjoy the content, you can scroll on down and you can hit that subscribe button, and then you can scroll on down and you can let me know what you thought of the final 3 episodes of Life is Strange. You can find the first half was last week's episode. You can tell me why you liked it, why you didn't like it, all that good stuff. Head on over to twitch.tv/ShaunosaurusRex for the streams on Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And as always, check back right here for more Week in Review every single Tuesday. See you next week. Fucking triple digits, man. I did it.